I had tennis elbow, so I know this topic very well. See that? That's a scar. Hey everyone, Dr. Todd from Gonstead Spine and Wellness, and I'm gonna tell you the absolute #1 worst exercise to do if you have tennis elbow. You must avoid this, so you gotta watch this video. But before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can stay in the loop of all the different videos where we cover these topics, because we do this for you so you can keep you and your family strong and healthy and confident for a lifetime. So with that said, let me first just show you. I had tennis elbow, so I know this topic very well. See that? That's a scar. So what is tennis elbow? Let's briefly talk about that before we get into what exercise to avoid. It's best to understand what it is. Tennis elbow is also called lateral epicondylitis. So you have a medial epicondyle and a lateral epicondyle. These are parts of the elbow, and there's muscles that attach to each area. And technically, there's a tendon that attaches from the muscle groups to that specific area, okay? So right here on the lateral epicondyle, this bony prominence, you have muscles in the forearm that allow you to extend or bring your hand back in this direction. When you extend, there's a group of muscles that have to fire and have to be strong to cause this action to happen. Oftentimes, there is this dysfunctional pattern in the forearm that leads to this problem to begin with. Most of us are much stronger in flexion, in many movements. Flexion, we live in flexion. Flexion, this is flexion, being flexed forward, pulled together like this. We're working in front of us, we're playing with our iPhones. Flexion is death, extension is life. You have to understand this. Flexion is death, extension is life, okay? Remember that. That actually follows over into spinal curvature as well. We have other videos that talk about this, like cervical curve, which also ties in to lateral epicondylitis because that's nerve supply to this area, these tissues. And if you watch any of our other stuff, you'll see that we always reiterate these principles because these principles are truth, and that your brain and your nervous system controls everything in your body, and ultimately you have to have proper nerve supply to the tissue and to the joint to have any sort of chance at things being healthy. You gotta clear that out first before you jump into the exercises or the things to avoid in this case. Now, back to what lateral epicondylitis is. You have muscles. Those muscles, primarily what's called the extensor carpi radialis brevis, turns into a tendon, attaches right there. I have the war wound to show that I've had a surgical intervention. Here's my story. Here's what happened. All right, so about, 15 years ago, I was very consistently into bodybuilding. I was doing lots of dysfunctional exercise. Wasn't into the kettlebell stuff like I have been for the last several years, and the stuff that we teach and we reiterate and we use in our functional rehab that we do in clinic and that we do with our patients and that we teach to other chiropractors. So I was doing dysfunctional bodybuilding exercise. Not to say it's all bad, but there's certain things that should not be done. And I was doing an exercise called an upright row. So I'll show you this exercise right here, where you have whether it's a free weight or this is a bar on a cable, and you bring this upright like this. And I don't even want to go through the range of motion because it just doesn't feel nice on my shoulders. But most importantly, when you're in flexion and you're going through all of these different dimensions, and I could talk about all the science behind it, but just the main thing, this is a bad position, not just for the shoulder, but also for the extensor insertion, which is right there on the outside of the elbow. So I've met many patients over the years that have also triggered lateral epicondylitis from doing things like upright rows. This is also known as tennis elbow, and the reason it's called tennis elbow is because the motion that a tennis player goes through typically will cause irritation to these extensor muscle, tendinous junction is what it's called. And not to be confused with golfer's elbow. Golfer's elbow is medial epicondylitis. That's where you have a problem with your forearm flexors. They go into the tendon, they go into the medial epicondyle. It pulls on that area, it hurts. and it can cause a tremendous amount of pain and dysfunction. Okay, so now the main thing that I really wanted to explain in this is not really go for 10 minutes showing you how not to do an exercise, but it's to teach you principles so you can apply this to many things in your life. And it's kind of like that whole adage of give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man a fish, feed him for a lifetime. We want to feed you for a lifetime of information. So I'm going to explain some more details so you can understand how this stuff works. This is the same way we explain this to our patients in our clinic. Now, again, back to that whole premise that we're in a flexion posture, flexion position. And remember, flexion is death, that's right. Extension is life, right? So we're in this flex position. Think about how often you take time throughout the day to perform an activity that requires you to pull your fingers out against resistance or extend your hand and your wrist against resistance. Almost never. So as a result, the flexors in the forearm are way stronger and way more active, and the extensors are oftentimes very weak and inactive. And when there's weakness, what happens is that even though it's hurting and it's overactive, that often happens when a tissue is weakened. And the way to fix it is not immediately jump in and start doing strengthening exercises. First, you have to make sure you have that tissue toned down and that it can relax and it can start to recuperate. So speaking from personal experience, when I went through this tennis elbow issue, the reason I got surgery is because I didn't follow the best science out there. I didn't follow the best recommendations. I didn't follow what I'm going to tell you to do right now. So I've learned from my own mistakes. You don't need to learn from making these mistakes on your own. You can learn from mine. What I did is I was very gung-ho into bodybuilding, and I was a chiropractor. I was adjusting patients. And I had a patient that was an orthopedic surgeon, and after I tried some very basic rehab stuff, and I really didn't know what I know now, you know, I've evolved as a clinician, just like so many of us in healthcare do over time, is what I did is I went and saw this guy, and I got a shot of Kenalog, which is a corticosteroid, into my extensor tendon because it hurt so bad and it was so debilitating, and I just wanted to get back into lifting weights. So I did that, and the pain went away, and it was gone, and it felt great. And I was thinking, man, this is a miracle, this is great. Well, here's what I didn't do correctly. I didn't change my activities. I went right back into what I was doing. I went right back into the gym, and I felt good for about probably 6 weeks. And I didn't give it proper time to heal. I didn't rehab it properly. I'm gonna show you some of those rehab exercises in another video, so make sure you watch out for that. But essentially what happened is I then went a second time and I got another shot of Kenalog, and I said, okay, this time I'm going to rehab it properly. I'm gonna rest it. Okay, I learned my lesson, and I went and I got the shot, and then I didn't really do that. I kept working out, and unfortunately, what a corticosteroid can do when it goes into a tendon is that if they're done too close together, it can tremendously weaken a tendon, and it can make it more prone for a rupture or a tear. So it wasn't a complete tear, but I tore it about 70%. And I remember when I did it adjusting a patient of mine. I went to adjust him, and I was in such a weakened, compromised position to begin with because of the exercises that I was doing and the fact I didn't give it time to rest and the fact that I had 2 corticosteroid injections. And I remember I felt it pop when I went to go give an adjustment. And immediately I couldn't straighten my arm. I remember it was stuck almost like this, and it hurt to straighten it. Had an MRI the next day. They said, oh yeah, 70% tear. And I went in that Saturday and had surgery. It took me almost 6 months to recover. I couldn't pick up a glass of water for probably about 2 months afterwards. And it was actually between when my wife and I moved from Albuquerque to Idaho, out here in Idaho. And so it timed it right so that I can actually take some time to recover. So I took some time off from adjusting and from working out and all of that sort of thing, and really modified heavily what I was doing. And when I got back into working out, I actually used these straps that you could strap onto your upper arm, and you could hook onto cables to do exercises. I'd put a strap right here, hook it onto a cable to do, arm work, bicep, tricep, anything that I didn't have to put any sort of load or tension through the wrist, because ultimately this motion through the wrist is what activates these muscles, which ticks off this area. Okay, so with that said, main exercise to avoid, upright rows was my nemesis. Doesn't mean that's the only exercise that causes a problem here. Anything where you're feeling a lot of tension or a lot of load to this backside of the forearm, I want you to just proceed with caution and make sure you watch the next video where we go over some good activation and strengthening exercises for the extensors, what things you can do even at your desk at work. Believe it or not, there's stuff you can do at your desk. And then ways to address a painful lateral epicondylitis to tone the pain down, the best way to recover. I'll give you some different tips and tricks, and I know this firsthand because I went through this myself. Okay, and remember, we serve two audiences. One is our community, our patients, those that we take care of here in Idaho, or patients that travel from out of state, but we also serve chiropractors. We have a program called MOVENOW University. Check it out at movenowu.com. We teach chiropractors how to put these types of systems into their practice so you can better serve your patients. So again, Dr. Todd, signing off. We'll see you on the next video. When it comes to the health of you and your family, results matter most.